Hey everyone, and welcome to a special Wednesday edition of ECH Kraken News. Now, before I get into all the free agent stuff, just going to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Fiverr. Please stay to the end, and I'll let you know more about that. Um, RJ, there was a big, lack of excitement, or not really lack of excitement, but lack of action on the part of the Kraken at the expansion draft. There were no side deals. We really only saw the Tyler Pitlick deal the following day. That had a lot of people very curious about what Ron Francis had up his sleeve. We knew the Kraken had a ton of cap space, and they did not disappoint today with making some pretty big signings.
Absolutely. The Kraken made a pretty big splash in free agency, and I'm excited to talk about what they did. Now, the first signing they made, and this was kind of telegraphed for a few days out, is Jaden Schwartz. He's a left wing who spent his prior 10 seasons, his whole NHL career with the St. Louis Blues. And the Kraken signed him to a 5-year deal at a $5.5 million cap hit. Schwartz is going to slide right in onto that first line, I think, looking at the lineup, and he'll provide some good scoring. And a $5.5 million deal for what he was pretty much a perennial 20-goal, 50-point player is pretty fair value.
Yeah, I really like this signing. I think he kind of fits perfectly with the identity that we now know Ron Francis wants for this team. Um, I would have liked them to, sign a true center. Schwartz can technically play center, but really he's going to be a left wing for them. For the $5.5 million AAV, we saw, of course, Philipp sign with the Kings for that same value. I can't help but wonder if maybe he would have been a better fit for the Kraken given their lack of center depth. But at the end of the day, Schwartz is the player we got. I think offensively, he's what the Kraken needed. We talked about it on all of our previous videos since the team, the roster's been announced. They need goal scoring, and Jaden Schwartz is going to be able to come in and help bring some offense into the lineup while still keeping with their identity of kind of grinding other teams down. He's not quite like a traditional power forward, but he's still very strong on the forecheck. He back checks well. He's going to bring a solid two-way game to the lineup. I also think he's got some good leadership qualities that he'll be able to bring in. I think, around the league, a lot of people have voiced, that they like him. And I think that's going to be important as, this team all gets to know each other and goes through the training camp process as they all come together after never playing together before.
Right. And you talk about fit with Schwartz. And I mean, as for the center thing, I think that's kind of a separate hole, but they also needed a left wing and they needed kind of what Schwartz brings. He does describe himself as a two-way player. He mentioned in his media availability, as far as what he brings to the game, he said he, likes to be first on the back check, first forward back, which is great to hear. And it fits in with what Ron Francis is looking at for his forwards. And I think also off the ice, it's a good fit. He mentioned that there was mutual interest, from him and Seattle. He knows the city already, which he had some experience, coming to Seattle. Unfortunately, his sister had to receive cancer treatment, and so a lot of that happened in Seattle. So he's familiar with the city, and he's gone through a rough time recently, obviously with his sister, everything that was going on with her, and then his father unexpectedly died of a heart attack at the end of last year. And it's been a rough go for him for sure. And listening to him talk in the media availability, he had to answer some very difficult questions about that, and I could tell that it was still something that he was feeling very strongly. And his numbers did drop off last year, and he did mention that as a potential reason why. And gosh, I don't I don't blame him on that. I mean, I think from that perspective, he's a good bounce back candidate, but also I think he's just going to be a great fit in the community as well. He's done a lot of charity work in the community with his his sister and working with people who have cancer, and so I think he's just going to be a great fit on and off the ice. He seems like a great guy. So I'm happy to have him in Seattle.
Yeah, and you never know how a change of scenery might help with some of that stuff. Um, he was not the only big signing today. He wasn't the only forward signing. Later in the day, the Kraken did address the center position when they signed Alexander Wennberg, formerly of the Florida Panthers. Why don't you give us the details on that contract?
Right. So the Kraken, as you said, did address the center position. Alexander Wennberg is, well, he's not kind of like a Dano. He's more of a middle six, center who brings offense. But the Kraken signed him to a 3-year deal at a $4.5 million cap hit. So I think he fits well, as far as, again, a middle six center who's going to give you some versatility there. You've got Yanni Gourde as your other middle six center, but you can kind of, flip him second, third line, wherever you need offense. I think Wennberg can bring that. He had a breakout season with the Florida Panthers last year, improved from a scoring standpoint, and really his playmaking ability is what I liked when watching him in Florida. And we did some scouting for that, obviously, for the expansion draft. So I liked what I saw from him there. And I liked that the term's only 3 years. He's 26, so you're going to be getting good value years, all 3 of those years. It's not like it's too long a term.
Yeah, no, I thought from a contract standpoint, the deal is perfect. Last year he scored 17 goals in the 56 game shortened season. He had a 20.7% shooting percentage, which I don't think is going to be repeatable. It isn't for anybody, basically. That being said, I can't help but, with the Florida connection, think of Jonathan Marchessault for the Golden Knights. He was someone who was kind of stuck, buried on the Florida Panthers depth chart at the center position, goes over to Vegas as part of the expansion draft process, and he totally blossoms with the additional ice time and everything into a really solid player for them. Again, like you were saying, a really good depth scoring option in that middle six center role. So I definitely think Wenberg has that same potential here. I think he can come in if they ask him to play 20 minutes a night. I mean, I think there's a chance he's, depending on what else they do in free agency and via trade, I think there's a chance he might be the opening night first line center on this team. So if he starts getting that kind of ice time, I think his offensive numbers are going to look really, really good. And they'll make that contract look really, really good.
Right. And we should find out right away, especially since it looks like Yanni Gourde is going to miss the start of the season. I think Wenberg's going to be relied upon heavily to play big minutes at center.
Yeah. All right. But then, last but certainly not least, arguably the biggest, splash of the day for all of the NHL in terms of free agency, but certainly for the Kraken, they went out and they signed a goalie, which I don't think many of us were expecting. Why don't you tell us about that?
No, I certainly didn't see this coming until it was announced. The Kraken signed former Avalanche goalie Philipp Grubauer to a 6-year deal, paying $5.9 million a year. Now, obviously, it seemed like Chris Driedger was going to be the starter, the clear starter for the Kraken. But they do bring in another netminder, and Grubauer was excellent last year. He was a Vezina finalist, and of course, he deserved a pay raise, and he got it with Seattle.
Yeah, it really, came by surprise for a lot of us. I like the contract a lot. I think, locking down a Vezina finalist, someone that we can, say there's a decently long track record for him, that he's been consistently, the same, which for goalies is the most important thing you could ever ask for, is some sort of, commonality through the years, especially as he's now going to be going on to his third team. Um, I, I think the contract works really well. I think he's going to be able to come in. He's probably going to be their starter. Certainly, it'll be, I would assume, a 1A, 1B kind of situation with Chris Driedger.
Right. I think we're talking goalie tandem for sure, because Driedger's role is not going to go away. And
Yeah.
ultimately, you look at this tandem, and it's an elite goalie tandem, right? I mean, save percentage. They ranked first, Driedger and Grubauer, first and 13th in save percentage over the last 2 seasons. Over the last 2 seasons, goals saved above average, sixth and eighth, and goals saved above expected, second and 27th. So, I mean, it's an elite goalie tandem, possibly the best in the NHL.
Right, and it's all coming at, less than $10 million AAV, which is, phenomenal for them. Um, it's just going to be interesting to see how the workload, works out. I agree. I think it's going to be a tandem kind of thing. I think Grubauer is probably going to get the nod in certain situations, such as maybe the playoffs or something. But of course, that'll depend on how they both do over the regular season. One of the things we talked about with Chris Drieger was he never really had a full season workload, and in a lot of ways, Grubauer hasn't either. Even the years where he started, last year he played most of the games for the Avalanche, but again, it was a shortened season, so he still only started 39 games, right? That would be less than
Right.
a regular half season in the for a regular NHL schedule. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if they do try to rely on Grubauer a little bit more and make him a true number one. How his body handles that and how he holds up come playoff time. Now, for that reason, I think that's why this tandem is going to work well. I think they're going to probably split things pretty evenly. Both guys should probably see 35 plus starts, I would assume. The Kraken obviously they have 14 back-to-back games, so those are going to get split up evenly. It's going to be interesting to see. It's a little odd because they'd made such a big deal with Chris Drieger at the expansion draft. You know what I mean? He was very much part of the presence of the team, and he's going to be one of the guys for this team. And then to go out and sign a goalie that you have to assume probably gets the opening night nod over him, just because you're paying him more and his track record is better, certainly longer. That's still a little bit of a head scratcher for me. I assume they talked with Drieger about all this as it was happening. Um, Obviously, I don't know that, but I hope they did, and I hope that Drieger's on board with it. But this does create an issue for them. Now it's I guess a good issue in the sense that they have three NHL caliber goalies now, but Vita Vanacek's gonna have to be moved here, right?
Absolutely. I think that's coming. Vonacek is not waivers exempt. So that means if they were to send him to the minors, he'd have to go through waivers and would obviously get picked up by another team. And I don't think the Kraken want to keep three goalies on their roster. I don't think that's something they're interested in. So I think Vonacek will be on the move. But as for Drieger and Grubauer, I would like to think that Drieger was kind of in on this and on the conversations. One thing this situation does remind me of is the most recent expansion team before Seattle, and that is Vegas. It's having two great goalies like that. You said you called it a problem, but a good problem. And that's kind of the way it was referred to in Vegas with Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Leonard. It's a double-edged sword. And, of course, that sword ended up impaling Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
But they had a Jennings Trophy winning tandem in net. And I think that's certainly a possibility for these two. But, you do have to worry about the other side of that, especially come the playoffs. There is controversy. I mean, we were seeing this with Vegas. Is it Leonard in net? Is it Fleury? Game one, game two, all of that stuff. And whichever guy you don't play, you're thinking, okay, here's a bunch of cap space that's just sitting on the bench. And, how else could that have helped us? You look at what Grubauer signed for, and you look at today, Philipp Danault. He signed for same term with LA and slightly less money. So you kind of see where else that could have gone. If it's Drieger on the bench, I don't think that's as big of an issue. But, you are still committing a good amount of money to the goaltending position. I know Vegas had 12 million committed, so it's not as big. This is much better. I don't mean to, it's certainly not as egregious as the Vegas situation. But I do think in some ways you have that. And so I think that's going to be a conversation that you end up having, especially as the playoffs roll around.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring up the Vegas situation, especially in the playoffs, because not only is it the issues you brought up, but it doesn't necessarily afford you the ability to have one of your goalies kind of work through any issues they're having, right? Okay, they let
Right.
in a soft goal. Instantly, there's that pressure of do we change out goalies, or they have one bad game, but maybe the whole team was kind of bad. But do you switch out goalies? Do you try to reinvigorate the team there? It creates a lot of coaching headaches once playoff time comes around. It's fantastic during the regular season, but it does create a lot of unnecessary noise around teams come playoff time, and so it'll be interesting to see how Seattle deals with that if they make the playoffs. At all. I guess you got to get there first, right? Um, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting signing. I don't, I'm not trying to say it was bad by any stretch. Obviously, it's fantastic to have somebody like Grubauer in, right? He's someone who's been a part of a Stanley Cup winning team, right? He's been there, he's done that. So uh, I'm thankful that Seattle has him. It's just there's a couple things about it that bear discussion.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't mean to put too negative a light on it because it's a big signing, but and I think right now it gives you potentially the best goalie tandem in the NHL, and we should be celebrating that, and that's going to be great. But I don't think we've heard the last of this. We're going to be covering this team, every going into the playoffs. I think this is something we're ultimately going to be talking a lot about.
Yeah. Well, it's only been day one. Obviously, three big moves. The Seattle Kraken still have 15 million, a little more than 15 million, I believe, in cap space available. The roster's pretty much filled out as far as what you need for a starting roster. That said, obviously, still have some center depth issues to address, and you could always use a little bit more depth scoring, I think. But it'll be interesting to see. I think they're probably done in the free agency pool. I'm expecting more stuff to come about from trades, I think, for Seattle. I don't know about you.
Right. I could see one more maybe minor acquisition, from a free agency standpoint if they see someone they like. I think as far as the big names, they've done what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, the Vonacek trade is coming. We'll see what they get back from that, whether that's the depth piece they want or whether it's draft picks or what they do. But yeah, they got plenty of cap space to play with. They don't need to make another addition. The roster's filled out, but there is plenty of room if they do want to do something. So that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, and you know what? Save that cap space for mid-season maybe, right? Come trade deadline, if you're in some sort of division race or you're in the playoff hunt or something and you want to make a move, it's always good to have the cap space to be able to just make that move without also having to send money either back or somewhere else. That always complicates things for teams at the trade deadline. So hopefully, Seattle won't have to deal with that. And then also it gives you more flexibility next year in free agency as well. So having cap space is just never a bad thing. So that's the bottom line, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep. And through today's stuff, we've seen what it can do. So
yeah. All right. So those are our thoughts on the Kraken's first day of free agency. As always, let us know down in the comments below your thoughts on all the signings that the Kraken made. Make sure to like this video if you can and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching to the end. It's because of the support of awesome fans like you that I get to tell you about Fiverr. Fiverr is a freelance services marketplace for small business owners or creatives to go and get help with things like web design, video editing, voiceover and music, or logo design. In fact, that's where we got our logo made, was through an artist on Fiverr. After coming up with a concept for our logo, we made a quick sketch, and then we found an artist on Fiverr that we liked their style and they fit our budget, and voila! We have the beautiful logo that we all know and love today. So if you're looking to do anything creative for your small business or creative efforts, make sure to check out Fiverr using the link in the description below. It really helps out the channel and we'd appreciate it a lot.